with unlimited alcohol and merely just say it's their responsibility and sort of wash your hands from it. You need the senior partners there. You need somebody who's looking after, who's saying, hey, enough's enough.
Do you agree?
Yeah, it sort of, to me, smacks of the behaviour of a bygone era. And it made me think, and as Chris pointed out, we don't know the particulars of this, and so this may be an unfair characterisation, but it made me think of the kind of behaviour like that you saw in The Wolf of Wall Street, that kind of unbridled kind of workplace culture. Obviously, it's not exactly dwarf tossing, but you know, it's the kind of thing you wouldn't expect to happen at an organisation as sort of professional and intellectual as a law firm.
And august. Misbehaviour is not confined to the law. Week this week at Vic, and out of Australia, a 200-page report detailing hazing rituals at Sydney University's residential colleges, perpetrated, quote, by a clique of powerful older students on first-year students for sexual and sadistic purposes. Why this week is the most dangerous for women on campus is the headline in the Sydney Morning Herald, and the report's authors calling for hazing rituals at colleges to be criminalised. I'm not going to go into the activity that has gone on. Would you go so far as criminalisation, Chris? That's quite a step.
Yeah, you put me right in the hot seat for that one, didn't you, Jim? Well, it depends on what the action is. I wouldn't have created a specific offence of hazing offences. No. I would say that the ordinary criminal law is well adept to be able to deal with this. What it does raise for me, of course, is the are we actually mentoring and raising as a society our young people in a way that actually means that they are going to be responsible, respectful citizens, or are we merely sort of looking in the past and what's happened and then inadvertently perpetuating that by raising often young men who don't respect young women?
Yeah, and that's a really important question. Professor Catherine Lumby says the report makes for sickening reading. She says she would not let her child live in a residential college, not after reading this report. Nadine, what did you think?
It made me think, actually, of being in high school. I seemed to be like at the tail end of the era where it was perhaps acceptable for a seventh former to take on the third formers and subject them to all sorts of crazy things. And I get the impression that now has been, hopefully, stamped out. I think a kid at my school had his collarbone broken when he was dunny flushed. Oh. And so that's assault, right?
Yeah.
Dunny flushed. I haven't heard that. Yeah, that used to be something that was quite regular at high school, wasn't it?
Yeah, and thought of as a rite of passage and quite harmless, but is essentially just bullying at the end of the day. And so I think maybe practices at a tertiary level haven't yet matured. And you're right, maybe we haven't taught our teenagers when they leave school what to do with their newfound freedom that is not destructive.
Universities are about providing an environment where young people can, to an extent, in some fields, experiment and to learn their place in the world and to transition. So we can't wrap them cotton wool, but we must be able to give them clear guidance and help.
It's been a great panel. We never got round to discussing Jamie White's theories of why your pleasure of using a plastic straw trumps the environment. But we'll save that for another day. Chris Gallivan, very nice to have you on. And Nadine Higgins, thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
We're back tomorrow. Here's Checkpoint.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, who will be the new national leader? The vote tomorrow, of course, we ask a former national leader, a former cabinet minister and a former coalition partner who they're picking and also what they need to do. And it is a big ask. Also tonight, an exclusive Checkpoint investigation reveals a disgraced real estate agent broke in another property deal less than 6 weeks after he was stripped of his licence. Commuter chaos, we love the alliteration, in Auckland as train drivers begin a 3-week strike. Wellington's rental prices rival Auckland's. More misery for Kaikoura as more time is needed to clear the slips caused by Cyclone Gita. It was all personal and no policy. The Prime Minister responds to the controversial 60 Minutes interview.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat and tēnei. Christchurch Hospital is warning of a particularly dangerous batch of the drug ecstasy may be circulating. The hospital says 9 people ended up in the emergency department over the weekend and 4 more have arrived today. An emergency doctor and toxicologist, Paul G, says all but one of the patients have now been discharged. But he says the number of people affected in a short space of time is unusual.
We see a steady stream of intoxicated and sometimes drug intoxicated people through the emergency department, but not so many in one cluster, and it's made us concerned that there is a bad batch of ecstasy out there.
Paul G says it could mean the ecstasy is very pure, or it may be adulterated with something else. State Highway 1 through Kaikoura is now unlikely to open until the end of the week. The route was damaged by large landslides after Cyclone Gita tore through the area last week. The Transport Agency says a decision will be made on the reopening date by Wednesday, but once open, the road will be single lane in more sections than it was before the storm. A spokesperson, Tim Crow, says they were surprised at how much material came down from the hills.
We did know there was a lot of material in the hills, but the size of Jacob's Ladder was quite surprising. However, that's what we're discovering. Until the hills stabilise, we'll be expecting some of these events. So this year we'll try and engineer our way out of them.
Tim Crow says in the meantime, travellers will need to use the inland road into Kaikoura. Oil and gas companies have suspended operations in the Papua New Guinea highlands after a 7.5 magnitude earthquake. The jolt occurred just before 4 this morning and there have been a series of aftershocks. Communication to the area is difficult with the mobile phone network disrupted. But the local MP says he has unconfirmed reports that 10 people have been killed and the quake has caused landslides and destroyed houses. One oilfield operator, Oil Search, says it's trying to confirm all its staff have been accounted for and is monitoring the impact of the quakes on the local communities. The lack of decent housing in Wellington has been blamed for high rental prices, which are pushing some people north of the city to the Hutt Valley. Figures released by Trade Me show renting in central Wellington now costs as much as it does in Auckland City, with the average asking rate for a rental now $550 a week. Harrison Vaughan from Tommy's Property Management says it doesn't help that what's available isn't always up to par.
We've got a lot of substandard rentals that do not meet the needs of most renters, and as a result, the ones that are favourable, with insulation and a warm and dry, those sorts of modern properties are seeing a lot of demand. There are tenants out there that are offering to pay more on those properties that are warm and dry, and as a result, the prices sort of over the board are going up.
Harrison Vaughan. Rental prices in Lower Hutt have also gone up by 13%. The Crown says the man accused of abducting a young woman in Auckland City and taking her to the Riverhead Quarry is telling a pack of lies. Colin Jack Mitchell gave evidence in his own defence today at the High Court in Auckland, where he's denied charges of kidnapping, causing grievous bodily harm and assaulting a woman with intent to sexually violate her. Mr Mitchell told the court he went to the Onehunga Wharf and later to a park to bathe his legs that had been injured in a workplace accident. But the prosecutor, Kirsten Lummis, asked why his cell phone was pinging off a tower in the Kumu Riverhead area.
Mr Mitchell, I suggest you're not sure because it's all a pack of lies, isn't it?
No, it's not.
You weren't in some park in Avondale, you were in Riverhead.
No, I was not.
Crown lawyer Kirsten Lummis. Tomorrow the court will hear closing addresses from the Crown and Defence. The 70-year-old man who was killed after being hit by rockfall outside of Tongariro National Park has been named. The police say he was Paul Leonard Batchelor of Taupō. Mr Batchelor had stopped to help clear a slip on State Highway 4 between Raitahi and Kakatahi when he was killed by falling rocks. Local iwi blessed the site this morning. The death has been referred to the coroner. It's 5:04. Sport and a consortium including 2 former NBA players and the co-owner of an English Premier League football club will become the new owners of the New Zealand Breakers basketball team. The long-time owners, Paul and Liz Blackwell, have announced a newly formed company will take control of the club from March the 1st. The consortium is led by the former NBA player Matt Walsh and includes Romy Chowdhury, a part owner of Swansea City Football Club. The former NBA All-Star Sean Marion is also involved. The Blackwells will stay on at the club they've owned for 13 years as minority shareholders, while Walsh will relocate from the United States to Auckland.
The more we looked into it, the more attractive it became. So we weren't necessarily looking for a basketball team. We're involved, my partner's in sports ownership in general. Most of it's been on the soccer side, but this was just an opportunity that we couldn't pass up.
The new Breakers owner, Matt Walsh. The Sydney Roosters are dismissing speculation that All Black Sonny Bill Williams could make a shock return to the National Rugby League club this year. Rumours of a Williams comeback spread after he was linked to the club by former Roosters player in an interview. It was suggested the dual international had been told he wasn't part of the All Blacks' plans for the 2019 Rugby World Cup and had already signed a deal to come back to the Roosters before the NRL finals after completing his Super Rugby duties with the Blues. However, the Roosters chairman Nick Politis has denied any knowledge of such a deal. That's the news.
Syrian ceasefire?
They're starting to receive patients, mostly women and children, who are showing signs of a chlorine gas attack in Ghouta.
Fronting up.
We can't just, I think, pick and choose when you're in opposition. You do what you have to, and you do every single thing.
Beating the odds.
You can keep tossing a coin up in the air, can't you? And it'll land heads and heads and heads. But one day, probability, it's going to land tails.
Triumph and tragedy. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy Espina, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, Pharmac's about to fund the HIV prevention drug, but will it reduce new transmissions? And after 10, telling important stories through non-fiction comics with cartoonist Sarah Glidden. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow for Northland fine, Auckland, Waikato and Coromandel in the Bay of Plenty. Cloud increasing, patchy light rain developing tonight or tomorrow morning. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain spreading north this afternoon and evening, then clearing tomorrow morning. Waitomo to Wellington, including the Central High Country and Wairarapa, also Marlborough, Nelson and Buller. Rain spreading north today, then gradually clearing from the south. Rain gradually spreading back southwards tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, fine today, high cloud increasing tomorrow and rain developing in Westland in the evening. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, isolated showers clearing and becoming fine this afternoon, becoming cloudy tomorrow and rain developing north of Christchurch at night. The Chatham Islands, a period of rain this afternoon followed by a few showers. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina Batten, and thank you everyone for joining us. Tomorrow evening, exactly 24 hours from now, Checkpoint will begin with an interview with the new leader of the National Party. There are 5 candidates in alphabetical order. They are Amy Adams, Simon Bridges, Judith Collins, Stephen Joyce and Mark Mitchell. And at a caucus meeting tomorrow morning, one of them will be selected to replace Bill English. Bridges and Adams are the favourites, we think, in that order, but it is close. There are 56 national MPs, the largest opposition party caucus New Zealand has ever seen. That means whoever's elected tomorrow has to unite caucus, control caucus, engage with the country, campaign towards the 2020 election and work to build relationships with prospective coalition partners, if there are any. Remember, the total number of non-national MPs on the opposition benches is 1. National needs friends or a leader that can win without them. And all of that must be achieved with 4 unsuccessful candidates for leadership watching you closely from behind. That's not easy. Just ask the politicians who've tried.
I personally think for this particular moment in time, opposition leader, the best choice would be Judith Collins.
Dr. Don Brash, who led National from 2003 to 2006 and found himself, like Bill English last year, not becoming Prime Minister because Winston Peters went with Labour. In the aftermath of the 2005 election, National and Labour were effectively tied.
Helen and I both had 57 people supporting us to be Prime Minister, and Winston Peters once again decided which of the two would be Prime Minister.
2005, 2017, the last 2 elections National have lost, they didn't have New Zealand First support. In 1996, they did, and they won.
I've been looking and waiting for somebody to say that I'm really committed to MMP. It's important now.
Heather Roy, former ACT MP who worked so well with National she became a minister under John Key. And if the Nats have learned anything from doing so well on election night but not becoming government, surely near the top of the list is the requirement to make coalition building work. where, Heather Roy wonders, has been the leadership candidate saying,
I've got a really good understanding of how MMP works, and I'm committed to building relationships so that we can get across the line in 2020. But no one's been saying that, and that prompted me to actually write about it yesterday.
Heather Roy's blog is a reminder to National's leadership candidates. There has not been a single government elected since MMP was first used in 1996 that got there on their own.
It seems to me that the most important thing for the new leader is that they are understanding of MMP and are prepared to embrace it. That's the thing that's going to move them forward.
But, and this is a big but, does whoever wins tomorrow have any chance of doing a deal with Winston Peters? I asked Dr Wayne Mapp, former Cabinet Minister and National MP for 15 years, under Bolger, who did do that deal with Peters, and Shipley, and English, and Key.
The one thing I would say is I think pretty much all of them will be thinking Winston Peters won't be going with us in 2020.
Indeed, when Wayne Mapp goes through National's MMP cupboard, it's currently bare.
New Zealand First is not going to go with National. The Greens are not going to go with National. ACT is there, but it's a shadow of its former self. They would need to actually build a bit.
And so while Heather Roy says National's new leader has to be a coalition builder, Wayne Mapp thinks National's caucus may vote for the candidate most capable of going it alone.
They're going to be looking at who's best positioned to fight a straight two-way battle. Because that's what it's going to be. The coalition issues don't actually matter that much because that's not an issue for 2020. Because, put it another way, if New Zealand First does get back in 2020, National is not the government. Simple as that.
And if it is that simple, and remember Winston Peters will be 75 in 2020 and may not want to run again, then whoever wins tomorrow may want to look at what happened the last time a three-term government lost. And to do that, let's go back a decade. Election night 2008.
Ladies and gentlemen, today New Zealand has spoken. In their hundreds of thousands across the country, they have voted for change. I can tell you there will be a new National-led government in New Zealand.
And as John Key was triumphantly becoming Prime Minister, Helen Clark was standing down.
And I do have one final thing to say, and that is that my job as leader of the Labour Party is complete. I will be standing down, yes, and I will be expecting Labour colleagues to elect a new leader before Christmas.
Christmas followed Christmas, 8 of them in fact, and Helen Clark's replacements came and went. Phil Goff for just over 3 years, David Shearer for just under 2 years, David Cunliffe for just over 1, and Andrew Little for 2 years, 8 months and 14 days. It all ended on August 1st last year.
I've just confirmed to the Labour caucus that I will step aside as leader of the Labour Party.
And later that same day,
following Andrew's announcement this morning, I was nominated to be leader of the Labour Party. My nomination was unanimously accepted. Calvin Davis was nominated as deputy, and this too was unanimously accepted.
Jacinda Ardern, Labour's 5th leader in opposition after Helen Clark, who, as we know, went on to become Prime Minister. So telling is the process of losing that the first 3, Goff, Shearer and Cunliffe, are no longer in Parliament at all. It may not be related, but David Shearer is now in South Sudan.
I'm Simon Bridges, leader of the National Party.
I'm Amy Adams. I have the privilege of leading the New Zealand National Party.
I'm Judith Collins. I'm the leader of the National Party.
As Checkpoint reported on Friday night, Simon Bridges and Amy Adams are out in front and running, we hear, neck and neck. Judith Collins is a long odds outsider. But Don Brash, who's been there, rates her. If he was back in caucus and voting tomorrow,
I think I'd vote for Judith.
Whoever gets the job, a warning from a man who's had it. It's brutally tough.
Being leader of the opposition is the toughest job in Parliament. You're expected to have an informed opinion on everything the Prime Minister has an opinion on, and you have a small fraction of her resources to back you up. So it's very, very tough. And I think only Judith Collins understands that reality.
Dr. Wayne Mapp, who worked under 4 national leaders and knows exactly the kind of lobbying that's going on, even as we speak probably, says the vote will have its own momentum in the caucus room tomorrow. Promises will have been made, yes, but won't all be kept.
And in my experience, the only vote you can count on is with someone who's basically written in blood that they're going to vote for you. And in this situation, there'll be a lot of people who will be holding their own counsel.
5 candidates, a large caucus, many of them not used to life in opposition. Heather Roy says the coalition building skills she thinks the new leader desperately needs may be required, first of all, internally, after the vote is done.
Leadership campaigns are always fraught, and even when a leader steps down voluntarily, if there's more than one contender, then the inevitable happens. Camps form, alliances build, deals are made, and the person who wins actually has to be able to bring all of those groups back together again without there being lingering resentments once they've been declared the winner.
It's Heather Roy, obviously the person who wins tomorrow, will join us on Checkpoint tomorrow night. We're going to talk more to Don Brash after 6 about the pressures of leading an opposition party in Parliament. 5:16. Thank you for being with us. If you are a regular Checkpoint listener, and we know you all are, you'll be familiar with Aaron Drever and his boutique grocery shop, the Grocers Market. Mr. Drever lost his real estate licence in 2016 after he was found guilty of misconduct on 9 occasions over 5 years. He then bought one of the failed boutique Nosh outlets and rebranded it the Grocers Market. He told Checkpoint he'd turned a new leaf and would sell his house if the business ever went bust. But last Monday, after just 4 months, the Grocers Market went into receivership, owing suppliers and staff hundreds of thousands of dollars, and Aaron Drever disappeared. The liquidator told us the house Mr. Drever pledged to sell is actually in a trust. Well, tonight, Checkpoint can reveal the disgraced real estate agent kept working after he was struck off. Mr. Drever sold a piece of land to his aunt for less than half its market value, and that property was flipped the same day for $500,000 more. The deal took place just a month after he was stripped of his real estate licence. Zach Fleming with this exclusive Checkpoint investigation.
In December 2016, strapped for cash and at risk of losing their lifeline, their liquor licence, the Avondale Bowling Club decided to sell its most valuable asset, its property.
We had problems, and he offered services.
We had problems and he offered his services. That's Pat Bell, the president of the Bowling Club, speaking in August last year to Auckland Council's District Licensing Committee. The he's referring to is Aaron Drever. Aaron Drever is on the club's committee, as is his former girlfriend and business partner Rachel Benji. This is how Pat Bell described his and Aaron's relationship to me.
Aaron Drever was my friend.
But Aaron Drever wasn't allowed to offer his services to the Avondale Bowling Club. He'd been struck off as a real estate agent a month earlier after 9 findings of unsatisfactory conduct and misconduct. The Real Estate Authority, when it cancelled Aaron Drever's licence, said the public needed to be protected from him.
Arranged the contract, he passed the contract to me and the secretary, we signed it, and the treasurer, we handed over to him and he went away.
So I can just double check. So Aaron gave you the contract and you signed it and then Aaron took it away?
Yeah, right.
Aaron Drever invoiced the club for $20,400 for his services. Pat says the club refused to pay. Mr. Drever had his licence cancelled a month earlier in November 2016. He was breaking the law, facilitating the sale.
But this isn't just a story about a struck-off real estate agent helping sell a property. The bowling green that was sold is on a busy part of Great North Road in Avondale. 1,100 square metres, it's a developer's dream. And in 2016, Auckland's property market was soaring. And yet the club, on recommendation from Aaron Drever, sold this green for just $300,000. And they sold it to a company set up in the name of Aaron Drever's aunt, Beverly Spain. It was then immediately on-sold for $825,000. Someone made $525,000 on the on-selling of this property, and it was all facilitated by struck-off real estate agent Aaron Drever.
Now, remember, Pat Bell told Auckland Council's District Licensing Committee last August that Aaron Drever approached the club, offering to help sell the green. But last week, Pat Bell told me something different.
Aaron Trevor was appointed by the board of Avondale Bowling Club.
And Aaron Trevor approached the club to offer his services?
No.
Well,
the board approached Aaron Trevor.
That's what you told the district licensing committee?
No, I didn't tell that.
Yes, you did.
Well, it's in our minutes anyway.
Enter a mortgage broker named Jonathan Michelle. He declined to be interviewed, but said in a statement Aaron Trevor approached him, asking if he wanted to buy the property, and he was interested because he could rezone it, build and make a profit. Mr. Michelle confirmed in his statement he knew the property was being transferred from the club to another company and then to him, in other words, being flipped. But Mr. Michelle said he had no idea that middle company was owned by Aaron Trevor's aunt. He said he thought he was buying off the club. The confusion is because Aaron Trevor's aunt's company was Avondale Bowling Club Limited. The real club is Avondale Bowling Club Incorporated.
Aaron Trevor won't return our calls, texts or emails, so we went to visit his house in Glen Eden. When we got there were 4 cars parked in the driveway, including a blue Mustang GT that we regularly see parked outside the grocer's market, and the blinds were open, but nobody answered when we knocked.
Avondale Bowling Club Limited was deregistered last week, around the time Checkpoint started asking questions about the sale of the bowling green. We tried to contact Aaron Trevor's aunt, Beverly Spain, to ask why.
But Beverly Spain doesn't actually live at the address listed for her company. She lives across the road in a Housing New Zealand house. It's an offence to provide misleading information under the Companies Act, but we weren't able to contact Beverly Spain, and the lawyer who helped her set up her company, who also happens to be Aaron Trevor's lawyer, Bruce Johnson from Central Park Legal, declined to be interviewed.
Rachel Benji, Aaron Trevor's ex-girlfriend and business partner, who was also the Avondale Bowling Club's secretary at the time of the sale, also declined to be interviewed. So, back to Pat Bell, Aaron Trevor's friend and the bowling club's president.
He helped the club arrange for someone to buy that property.
And you knew that it was illegal for him
to
do that?
I know that, yeah.
It's not known where the $525,000 profit from flipping the property in one day went. And what about the $300,000 paid to the club? Pat Bell told the Auckland Council liquor licence hearing last August that he put the $300,000 into his solicitor's bank account because he was going overseas. Here's District Licensing Committee Chair Katia Fraser's response.
But when you put money into the account for the club, how many people have to sign to be able to take that money out?
Just 2.
2. So even with that level of security, you decided to put it into that's a very, I don't quite understand why you did that. It's very, very unusual, unless the money is required for something else, that you would leave it in your solicitor's trust account.
Mr. Bell responded that his committee was happy for it to be in his solicitor's account, and that the $300,000 was going to be spent on club maintenance. But 5 months later, the Avondale Bowling Club has been neglected and is in a state of disrepair, and the money is all gone. A meeting was held at the club a week ago tonight.
It's a statement from the person who ran the meetings that that money has all gone. That was an actual statement by him. It's not an indication.
And was that disputed by anyone in the meeting?
No, he confirmed it.
Paul Davey, a former member of the Avondale Bowling Club, tried to ask what it was spent on.
The question was asked, if we've had $300,000 from the sale of that, how come we've still got $40,000 odd, approximately, of debt in the name of the club to suppliers and third parties? And the Gerald, who was running the meeting, basically said he had no interest in going back and investigating those issues. And there was no indication of where that money was spent. So nobody has any idea, and I've spoken to a few past members, nobody has any idea where that money's gone.
So, Aaron Trevor, a struck-off real estate agent, helped to illegally facilitate the sale of an Avondale Bowling Club green to his aunt for $300,000. It was then immediately on-sold for $825,000. And nobody seems to have any idea where any of that money has gone. Auckland Bowls has taken over the Avondale Bowling Club but won't comment. And the Real Estate Authority is looking into the sale, but said it isn't in a position to comment at this stage. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
And if you are or have been a member of the Avondale Bowling Club, we'd love to hear from you. Text us 2101 and we'll give you a call. Sexist, retrograde, sleazy and repugnant are among the reviews an Australian journalist has been getting for his interview with New Zealand's Prime Minister. 60 Minutes reporter Charles Woolley's story aired last night, in which he focused on her relationship with partner Clark Gayford, asked about the conception of their child, even seems to have tried to calculate when it happened, and as Nita Blake-Pearson reports, many feel Mr Woolley well and truly crossed a line.
Charles Woolley's story kicks off with glowing praise of the Prime Minister's ability to combine politics with pregnancy, a feat he fawns over almost constantly throughout his 13-minute report. He's impressed with her work skills, among others.
I've met a lot of Prime Ministers in my time, but none so young, not too many so smart, and never one so attractive.
Mr Woolley says New Zealand's in the grip of Jacinda mania.
My name is Jacinda. At 37, Jacinda Ardern is the world's youngest female leader and the most popular. A barefoot politician with the electric smile and the modern touch.
A modern touch that perhaps Charles Woolley has yet to catch up with.
What kind of responsibilities are you seeing for the first bloke? As well as child rearing, of course.
I don't think it's the kind of thing that we sit down and write lists around. And, you know, to be fair to Clark, he already takes on a lot of those duties. I mean, he does all the household washing.
Are you doing the laundry?
Well, it's just a job that needs doing.
Mr Woolley's story was 2 weeks in the making. He accompanied the Prime Minister to Waitangi, where he stood with her as she served bacon butties.
Prime Minister, we don't see this in Australia.
Oh, did you not?
No, I don't think Malcolm Turnbull does this.
And later backgrounds her upbringing in Morrinsville.
How did a nice person like you then, growing up in that way, get involved in the sordid world of politics?
Nice people go into politics.
And thanks to her partner, the Prime Minister seemingly has it all.
This stylish makeover of New Zealand politics is completed by Jacinda's partner, TV star Clark Gayford.
At one point, the reporter joins Clark Gayford for a spot of fishing where they wrestle with rods on a boat deck.
I think mine's bigger than yours.
And he manages to orchestrate the zinger of a line.
Jacinda, what a great catch.
But Charles quickly reminds us that Mr Gayford's fishing days are numbered as he prepares for the role of New Zealand's first bloke. In an interview with both Miss Ardern and Mr Gayford, the reporter proclaims he has a particularly important question, prompting shocked looks and what appears to be an eye roll from the Prime Minister.
What exactly is the date the baby's due?
17th of June.
The 17th. It's interesting how much people have been counting back to the conception, as it were.
Really?
Well, having produced 6 children, it doesn't amaze me that people can have children. Why shouldn't a child be conceived during an election campaign?
Well, I mean,
not why should. I'm not asking why should.
No,
I'd say why shouldn't.
But I should add that the election was done. Yeah.
The interview has been widely criticised on social media. Critics said Charles Woolley's focus on Jacinda Ardern's looks and pregnancy rather than her policies was sexist, patronising and cringeworthy. Others seem to be oblivious to the concerns, with some men unsure how Mr Woolley's complimentary story has caused offence. 60 Minutes has yet to comment on the criticism. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Nita Blake-Pearson, aho.
Well, since Nita put her voice down saying they haven't commented, they did. Just a short time ago, 60 Minutes released a statement in support of Mr Woolley's story. It says its reporters have always asked the tough questions. It says, and I quote, Charles Woolley came away from his interview with Jacinda Ardern in awe of her poise, intelligence and everyday charm, which was reflected in this story. And the Prime Minister responded to the 60 Minutes interview this afternoon at her post-cabinet media conference. She says she wasn't fazed by it.
I haven't had a chance, obviously, to watch the show. It aired in Australia last night. It's fair to say that actually I couldn't recall there being anything from the interview that I found particularly stood out for me and had to be reminded of that question. And you're assuming that I haven't been asked by New Zealand media that question before as well.
Have New Zealand media asked you if you conceived your baby?
They've asked a question that in a roundabout way implied that, yes.
So you were comfortable, generally you were comfortable?
Oh, look, nothing stood out for me. Look, at the time, certainly I think that question threw me a little bit, but it would be going a bit far to say I was somehow offended by it. I wasn't. It's one of, I think, put under the heading of too much information. That's where I'd put that.
Do you find it sexist or insulting at all?
No, it didn't. Again, as I say, the interview didn't particularly stand out for me in a way that made sense when I saw some of the headlines that followed on. I had to look back and remind myself of what the questions might have been. I don't know, I haven't spent a lot of time analysing it. Maybe I've lost all my sensitivity. Maybe it's just that I'm from Morrinsville. I don't know, but I wasn't particularly fazed by any of it.
You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up, rail workers strike as March madness, more alliteration begins. Commuter chaos, terrible traffic. We're going to cover it all. The cost of Cyclone Gita on roads in Kaikoura and Takaka and the economic impact on businesses in New Plymouth. And Wellington's rental prices rival Auckland's for the first time, and this is probably an area in which the two cities don't want to compete. We'd love your feedback. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. 29 to 6. Here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
Auckland commuters are again having their travel disrupted as train staff are in the midst of industrial action. Talks with the operator Transdev are set down for Wednesday, and there could be further disruptions if they don't make progress. Peak hour train services at the busiest time of year have halved for the next 3 weeks because staff are refusing to work overtime. The Rail and Maritime Union organiser John Kerr says depending on the talks with Transdev, the union could lift the overtime ban or go on strike. The transport agency is surprised at the amount of debris that's come down off the hills over the State Highway 1 through Kaikoura and closed the road until the end of the week. A spokesperson, Tim Crowe, says the agency will decide on Wednesday when to reopen, but once opened, the road will be single lane in more sections than it was before the storm. He says until the hills stabilise there are likely to be more slips. An unusual cluster of people in Christchurch Hospital's emergency department with reactions to the drug ecstasy has alerted doctors to a particularly dangerous batch. 9 people ended up in emergency over the weekend and 4 more have arrived today. An emergency doctor and toxicologist Paul G says there's usually a steady stream of patients with ecstasy problems, but not so many in one cluster. The lack of decent housing in Wellington is being blamed for high rental prices, which are pushing some people north of the city to the Hutt Valley. Figures released by Trade Me show renting in central Wellington now costs as much as it does in Auckland City. Harrison Vaughan from Tommy's Property Management says substandard rentals that do not meet the needs of most renters are pushing up demand for flats that are warm and dry. Oil and gas companies have suspended operations in the Papua New Guinea highlands after a 7.5 magnitude earthquake. The jolt occurred just before 4 this morning, and there have been a series of aftershocks. Communication to the area is difficult with the mobile phone network disrupted. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thanks very much indeed, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Jonathan Mitchell, one of our excellent trio of business reporters this week. It's you, Jono. We're delighted to have you. Another week of company earnings and a couple of businesses miss expectations, right?
That's right. Evening, John. Good to be back here. We're halfway through our reporting season. You know, we had the big ones, Fletcher Building, A2 Milk, in the past week. But today we had network operator Chorus. They were sort of flagging a lower half-year profit. It came in $47 million compared with $66 million the year before, mainly because of losses with connections to the old copper network. There were gains for fibre connections, but the company says it's quite comfortable with the full year because the rate of losses has eased back, so they're quite comfortable that their full year underlying earnings will be similar to last year's. Then we had retirement village operator MetLife Kena. This sector's been strong. The rising baby boomer population, demand for aged care services, but its profit fell to $56 million compared with the record $165 million last year. Now, the main reason for the decline was it sold fewer units and the property gains weren't as much as last year, but you know, they're going to still paying a dividend to shareholders of 3 cents per share, and their full year underlying profit is likely to be in line with last year's as well.
Okay, things a little more complex for CBL Corporation, Jono?
The stories are becoming a little bit difficult to follow. What we do know is that they're a specialist insurer in the construction sector. They've been on a shared trading halt, both sides of the Tasman, New Zealand and Australia. Their credit rating has been downgraded. Now, it's all to do with problems with their French construction business, which they've decided to exit. They have been looking to raise $100 million to cover losses there. But to add to the story, on Friday, the High Court placed the local arm, CBL Insurance Division, into interim liquidation. That was at the directive of the Reserve Bank. So Corda Mentha is now the voluntary administrator for that company. Tomorrow, we're likely to get an understanding of their financial situation. They're going to put out their financial results.
You have those for us tomorrow night, I assume. What happened on the markets today?
The top 50 index made gains. There was some strong showing from A2 Milk shares. That's probably after last week's gains. So that sent the market up 39 points to 8,341. And the Kiwi dollar is trading at 73.2 US cents and Australia 93.1 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell, thank you so much. Talk to you tomorrow night. It's coming up to 24 minutes to 6. March Madness, Auckland's annual period of traffic mayhem, looks set to start early due to industrial action by train staff. This is a real standoff between the employer and the workers. The action coincides with the start of the busiest period for public transport and cars as students return to university. Train staff are refusing to work overtime in protest to plans to do away with train managers and operate driver-only trains. The standoff has led to delays and packed carriages today. Laura Tupor reports.
We normally get the 7:35 train, but now we get the 7:45 train.
How are you feeling about that?
Angry. I wish they were more frequent, that they ran more frequently.
I think that's just cost cutting.
Yeah. You're going to be late for work?
Yeah, we will be at this rate.
Yeah, but because of the later
this
train.
This is going to be for the next 3 weeks, they tell us. Oh, good grief.
Give the workers what they want so we can go back to, what we took for
granted. Sort out their problems.
Yeah.
You could see the look of frustration on people's faces this morning as they waited longer than usual at train platforms and crammed into carriages at peak time. For the next 3 weeks, train services will run every 20 minutes instead of every 10 at peak times, right as the university year kicks off, heralding the beginning of what's dubbed March Madness. Some workers and students weren't happy.
7:35 actually suits me, so I'm on dot for my office timings. I'll be finishing late because of it. If this is the regular thing, then I'm gonna aim for earlier train.
I arrived just as the 7:25 train was leaving, which is what I'd usually catch. So I've had to wait 20 minutes, but I'm happy about them performing action.
I'll be late for school because my school you need to sign in at 8:10. And then it kind of gets me there at 8:20, so I'll kind of be late every morning.
No, running late, and I've just heard a message from a guy from work that 2 trains have just gone past him in Ellerslie, so both full. So it depends on how many people get off, I guess, whether we can actually get on.
It does put a bit of a dent in my morning schedule. I'm not actually going that far. I'm only going maybe 4 or 5 stops, and it probably takes me an hour.
Auckland Transport's rail services manager, Craig Inger, says there was also a handful of people at Orake station who had to wait for the next train because of a full Eastern Line service. But he thinks AT gets a pass mark for its handling of rush hour this morning.
There's some learnings that we'll take from this morning and we'll put in place for tomorrow, but realistically going on the situation, what we wanted to do was make sure this was a 20-minute frequent provides some surety around service.
The Rail and Maritime Union organiser, John Kerr, says the move to get rid of train managers who settle disputes on trains and open and close doors will make it unsafe for passengers. Transdev and AT want train drivers to control the doors and employ train officers who will come on and off trains to manage issues. Mr Kerr says train drivers are refusing to work overtime until the matter is settled.
We never anticipated that this would have the impact it had. We issued notice of the overtime ban on Saturday afternoon within an hour. AT published the reduced timetable. That was a big surprise to us.
John Kerr says the union will meet with the train operator Transdev on Wednesday, and depending on the outcome, it has a few options up its sleeve.
We'll quite happily lift the overtime ban. If that's not the case, we also have a mandate for full stoppages of the network, and we'll obviously consider that.
He says the ideal outcome will be to negotiate a 2-year collective agreement to keep train managers and discuss how to work through safety concerns. But for now, Auckland Transport's Craig Inger says it's doing its best.
We doubled up, so we do, during our normal peak operation, we do have some 3-car trains. Those were all doubled up. For tomorrow, it's really around the amount of staff that's going to be available. There may be options to try to put in extra services if possible, if we have enough staff, and the operator will do that if we can. So we won't know that till tomorrow morning.
Auckland Transport says there were 4,500 more seats on buses today, and the Transport Agency says although traffic was heavy on the motorways, it wasn't yet anything out of the ordinary. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Laura Tupou Aho.
So that's Laura looking at what's going on. Our reporter Eva Corlett is at Britomart, the train station in central Auckland. We'll speak to her after 6 o'clock for the latest. Now, normally we go to weather straight after business, but tonight yours truly forgot. Sorry, but variety's the spice of life. Let's bring in Met Service meteorologist John Law now. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora. As we head in towards Tuesday, rather a cloudy and grey day across the northern parts of the country for Auckland and across in towards Coromandel. Some patchy rain or drizzle with us as we head through the daytime as well. And a return of that real humid air this week, highs around about 24 degrees Celsius. Heading down to the north side, we will find that rain spreading southwards through the daytime and also bringing with it that humid air back towards us as we go through the next few days. Daytime highs back to around about 23 degrees Celsius, but those night times are going to be pretty warm. For Wellington, it's a dry start today, but the cloud will thicken up as we head through the daytime and some rain spreading down towards us through the afternoon or evening time. A little bit of a better story out on the eastern coast for Gisborne and down towards Napier. A few early showers, but brightening up for the afternoon. But that rain spreading across us as we head through the daytime. For the South Island, it's generally a drier start today. Still areas of cloud with us around that eastern coast, the likes of Christchurch and Canterbury. Highs here though, 16 degrees Celsius and some rain arriving overnight. But it is looking like a wetter end today for Nelson and across those northern parts of the South Island as rain sinks southwards through the daytime. We are going to find the best place to be, the driest spots anyway, back down towards Dunedin and Invercargill. But here, feeling a little bit cooler with highs around about 17, 18, even 19 degrees Celsius. And that's it from me.
Thanks, John. Some low highs there. It will be months before the only road to Takaka is back to normal. One lane was opened yesterday. The job of clearing slips and rebuilding entire sections of road will extend into winter as the aftermath of Cyclone Gita becomes very apparent. There is more misery for businesses in Kaikoura. Boy, they've had a rough couple of years as well, with news the gigantic slips brought down north and south of the town in last week's storm, and they won't be fully cleared until the end of this week. State Highway 1 and the train line. Colin Young reports.
Access to Golden Bay and the 6,000 people who live there has now been re-established in the form of a twice-daily convoy, one at 7 in the morning, the other at 5 at night, taking freight and light vehicles in both directions across the single lane that's been established around and over numerous slips. Starting at 5 this evening, those towing caravans and boats will also be allowed across. The Transport Agency is predicting the long-term repairs to the road will stretch into winter. For Golden Bay businesses relying on tourists who are now in peak season, the bad press the bay has received in recent days has been fatal. Here's the owner of the Pohara camping ground, John Tate.
Oh, it's a shocker. I mean, normally this time of the year the camp would be 3/4 full. You know, like last night we probably had about 20 people here. So, you know, it's damaging, you know, all tourism. I would say the whole of Golden Bay, which is a real shame, as I was saying. You know, everything's open and everything's just fine over here. It's just getting here.
John Tate wants the Transport Agency to amend its notice to drivers, which at the moment says only those needing to urgently travel over the hill should make the trip. The agency's Frank Porter says those wanting to visit the area should still make the trip, with this caveat.
Oh, you should certainly consider it. All we're saying is that we just can't absolutely guarantee that you might get out on the day that you plan to get out. The whole of that hillside on the Ruoka side, you know, it is really fragile. And we're expecting that if we get, say, 50 millimetres of rain or something like that we may have to close the road.
The last part of the country to feel the force of Cyclone Gita was the Kaikoura coast, where the impact has been just as great as Golden Bay. Some hillsides already made fragile by earthquakes were hit with up to 200 millimetres of rain in a short space of time. Today it was announced the main road north and south of the town will remain closed until at least Sunday, due to massive slips to the north and the road going out through the Hunterleys to the south. The Transport Agency's Tim Crow says they were surprised at how much material came down from the hills.
We did know there was a lot of material in the hills, but
you know, the size of Jacob's Ladder was quite surprising. However, you know, that's what we're discovering. Until the hills stabilise, we'll be expecting some of these events. So this year we'll try and engineer our way out of them.
Dennis Berman's Kaikoura Encounter business offers tourists the chance to swim with dolphins. He says while visitors can still get into the town via the inland route, many are put off making the trip because of the extra travel time. As a result, the business in his cafe has halved since Geeta came calling last week.
We're still getting people coming in, but lots of rearranging of plans, lots of cancellations. But I suppose we've been really impacted in the likes of our cafe, where you're fully staffed this time of the year and you have all your staff just standing around with not a lot to do because we're not getting the through traffic.
Mr Berman says it's a cruel blow after what was shaping as a record season for the town, following a year out of action due to the earthquakes. The Transport Agency will confirm on Wednesday exactly when the road will reopen. While it hopes this will happen on Sunday, any more rain than is already forecast could push things out further. For Checkpoint, ko Konanyang Tene.
Because the pictures really are striking. That's a hell of a slip. Renting in Wellington CBD now costs as much as it does in Auckland City, and that's if you're able to find a property. New figures released by Trade Me show the average asking rate for a rental in the city is now $550 a week. And as Katie Scotcher reports, the Hutt Valley is becoming popular as people face being priced out of the central Wellington market.
Students at Victoria University's Orientation Week weren't surprised to hear about the rising cost of renting in the city. With classes starting next Monday, students have been struggling to find accommodation for months.
Ever since the prices for the allowance went up, landlords have tended to increase their rent as well.
When I first started renting, it was kind of more around $150 mark, but now it's gone way out. It's like $200 or more.
I've been looking for flats on Trade Me, but it's quite hard to get it. There was a rent increase in the flat that I left, and the flat that I have arrived at, people left because they couldn't actually live and pay that rent.
Renting a property in Wellington City now costs 4.2% more than it did last January. That's because it's become harder to find available flats, with the number of rentals listed in January down 11%. The head of Trade Me Property, Nigel Jeffries, says one 3-bedroom property received 127 inquiries in just 48 hours.
It's really a supply and demand equation. The supply of Wellington rentals isn't keeping up with the demand. Wellington, a popular place for people to work. They all want somewhere to, usually to rent. There just isn't the supply coming onto the market to satisfy that.
Harrison Vaughan from Tommy's Property Management says it doesn't help that what's available isn't always up to par.
We've got a lot of substandard rentals that do not meet the needs of most renters, and as a result, the ones that are favourable, you know, with insulation and a warm and dry, those sorts of modern properties are seeing a lot of demand. There are tenants out there that are offering to pay more on those properties that are warm and dry, and as a result, the prices sort of over the board are going up.
Mr Vaughan says the number of applications received this year is more than double the amount in previous years. Trade Me's Nigel Jeffries says as a result, tenants are having to find rentals in places such as Lower and Upper Hutt, which saw an increase of 13% and 2% respectively. Olivia Stevens and her partner are among those heading to the Hutt Valley. She was flat hunting as part of a group for a property to rent in Wellington, but decided to look into other options.
We decided to look at our kind of financial situation, and when we saw, after doing a bit of looking online, that we had enough money to buy a house, we decided that that kind of made more sense. Obviously, houses within Wellington are pretty expensive, so we're looking further afield in Lower Hutt.
Miss Stevens says after doing some research, it's cheaper for her to buy a house in the Hutt Valley than rent in the city. But she says not everyone is as fortunate to be able to say goodbye to the rental market and its high prices. For Checkpoint, call Katie Scotcher Tene.
Thanks, Katie. If you are looking for accommodation in Wellington, or you're living in a substandard flat that you think is just ridiculously overpriced, we'd love to hear from you. Probably the best way to get in touch is text us 2101 and we will give you a call, 2101. Thank you. 11 to 6. The defence for the man accused of abducting a young woman and taking her to a West Auckland quarry is that essentially he's in the dock because of a number of coincidences. Colin Jack Mitchell gave evidence in his own defence at the High Court in Auckland today. He's on trial, having denied charges of kidnapping, causing grievous bodily harm and assaulting a woman with intent to sexually violate her. Edward Gay filed this report.
The Crown says Colin Jack Mitchell left his Onehunga flat late at night in his Ford Mondeo and picked up a young woman who was drunk from Great North Road in the city. Instead of dropping her home, he drove her 25 kilometres to a quarry in Riverhead, where he hit her with a weapon and tried to sexually attack her. But today, the 59-year-old truck driver gave his side of the story. Mr Mitchell said he watched a movie on television and played cards on his computer before he left his home to get some relief for his swollen legs. Just one of his injuries caused in a workplace accident 6 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was 2011, late May 2011, I got crushed by a 780 kg coil. Well, it gave me an open book break on my pelvis, broke all my ribs, my leg, lacerated the spleen, punctured the lungs. I ended up in hospital, not allowed to move for about 15 weeks.
Colin Mitchell said he'd often bathe his legs at Onehunga Wharf to soothe the swelling, but under cross-examination from the Crown Prosecutor Kirsten Lummis, Mr Mitchell was asked why his cell phone was pinging off a cell phone site in the Riverhead Kumu area. Mr Mitchell said he couldn't explain that because he was in a park in Avondale.
What do you do when you get to these parks?
I just relax, put my feet up. If there's sand there, I just kind of take my socks off and kind of go through the sand. It helps with circulation on my legs.
Are you saying there's sand at these parks?
Some of them there is, some of them there isn't. The one at this one in New Lynn, they used to have sand there and they took it out and they've got bark, I think. So it's just where the swings are.
So that wouldn't be very comfortable on your feet, I take it?
Bark, no.
So you wouldn't spend much time rubbing your feet through bark?
No.
Miss Lummis was not convinced by his answers.
Mr Mitchell, I suggest you're not sure because it's all a pack of lies, isn't it?
No, it's not.
You weren't in some park in Avondale. You were in Riverhead.
No, I was not.
Miss Lummis also asked questions about CCTV footage that showed a car the Crown says is Mr Mitchell's Ford Mondeo captured on security cameras close to the scene of the abduction.
When you were watching the clip, did you accept it's a silver Ford Mondeo?
It looks similar, yes.
And the tyre formation that Callum Neal spoke of that we can see quite clearly there, and that's the tyre formation of your car, isn't it?
It looks similar, yes.
When it came to the silver car captured on cameras leaving the quarry, Mr Mitchell said he couldn't be sure. The Crown says Mr Mitchell left his gloves at the scene. A DNA scan of the gloves was a match to Mr Mitchell. But Mr Mitchell said he tried on a pair of gloves while shopping at the warehouse. He wore them for about a minute but put them back because they were too thick to tie ropes with at work and were too expensive.
I suggest that this is just a story that you've made up, Mr Mitchell, to explain how your DNA came to be on those gloves in the quarry.
No, it's not. I try other things on in the warehouse. I try jackets on. I try T-shirts, well, not T-shirts, but shirts. They've got changing rooms there to see if they fit.
The jury is due to hear closing addresses from the Crown and Defence tomorrow. O te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Edward Gay ahau.
The scale of the economic impact of New Plymouth's water crisis is beginning to hit home. Dozens of small businesses are smarting after losing trade when their water supply was cut off for up to 4 days. And at least one international food exporter was still out of action. This morning, our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
Van Dyke Fine Foods is best known for Marcel's pancakes. From its base in the Bell Block Industrial Estate on the fringes of New Plymouth, the company exports the Belgian-style delicacy throughout Asia and to the Middle East. Today, its head engineer, George Dixon, has been tackling an unusual task, disconnecting the factory from the town's water supply.
George, so where's that coming from and heading to?
Okay, so we've got a 29,000 litre tank on site that we're going to be sucking it out of, and we're going to introduce it into our main water supply into our factory, bypassing the town supply, giving us nice, clean, potable water.
Mr Dixon explains water is a vital ingredient at Van Dyke's.
So we use all our water all for our batters, mixers and cleaning, so we need a high grade of water for that, because we don't want any contaminants, of course. And
yeah. Town supply's not meeting the grade at the moment?
Not at the moment, no. Hopefully within the week they'll have it all sorted and we'll be back to where we should be.
The Chief Executive, Natalie Innes, says Van Dyke's shut on Wednesday and put its 26 staff on light duties or sent them home. Ms Innes says the disruption has been costly, but she's confident insurance will cover it.
3 or 4 days without production, so yeah, it's going to be difficult for us. We're going to have to do a bit of overtime to catch up.
Are you able to put a dollar figure in general terms?
I'd say definitely tens of thousands, possibly getting into the hundreds.
Near neighbour Tegel processes about 20% of the country's poultry at its Bell Block plant, where it employs about 1,000 people. The company says the fallen tree, which crippled New Plymouth's water supply, is an unprecedented event for Tegel. It closed for 2 days and is now using water tankers and adding chlorine to the town supply to stay operational. And it's not just big companies that are suffering. The owner of the Eden Cafe in Bell Block, Satish Kumar, says there was initially confusion about whether or not he could run his coffee machine. But eventually he had no running water and had no option but to close.
It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, the big weekend business will really lose.
Have you any idea of how much it cost you?
It's around $3,000 to $5,000 total loss.
Mr. Kumar is talking with his insurers. A few doors down, the owner of Sheer Bliss Hair and Body, Nadia Farmer, says they could only offer dry cuts.
I myself couldn't work because I had mainly colours in, so I had to shift all my clients to other days.
Do you have any idea of what your turnover was down?
It would be in the thousands, yeah.
At the Naki Butcher in Waitara, Chloe Northcott says no water meant no new business. And if that wasn't bad enough, after being closed for 2 days, the young butcher drew the short straw when they opened today.
This morning I had to come in and do a big clean up because we ran out of water last week. That's not pleasant.
So what did that involve?
Hosing everything down, sanifoaming, which is like a chemical that we use that breaks down everything and just makes it easier to scrub it, and yeah, hot watering everything.
Spare a thought also for New Plymouth local Brent Asquith, who had timed the opening of his car wash business to coincide with a classic car festival.
Yeah, we were closed from Wednesday morning through till Saturday evening under instruction from Civil Defence. So we were aiming to get up and running for Americana. That was one of our, basically the major event of the year for us. It was just highly disappointing that Cyclone Gita came through and put a hold on things.
Mr. Asquith says he had no water at home, so was happy to comply. The New Plymouth District Council says it is working closely with businesses and apologises for any inconvenience or confusion caused by the water outage. It says the boil water notice is likely to remain in place for a week. I Taranaki mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Robin Martin aho.
It is 2.5 minutes to 6. Thank you very much for your feedback tonight. Lots of it coming in. Lots of you unimpressed by Charles Woolley and Jacinda Ardern's treatment by him. For God's sake, John, my respect for our new PM keeps rising when I hear what sort of inane questions she and her husband have to field. What era is that man living in? They're both examples of a young, articulate generation who can relate to people in a positive and honest way, unlike a lot of their older colleagues, says John, who identifies him as being 71 years of age. I think we've got a caller because another text came in from Riwaka, and it said, where am I? I've lost it here. In line to get over the Tākea Hills on Riwaka side, 2-hour wait so far, maybe one to go. Going home from work, everyone well behaved. Road crew doing their best. Paul, are you on the line, bro?
I am here. I'm sitting here listening to the radio.
Well, we're delighted to have you coming. I think it's the first time we've ever had a traffic report from the Tākea Hills. So you are heading home after a day at work.
I am indeed.
And how long have you been waiting?
Well, I got here a bit early. They said the convoy would start at 5. I got here at 4, and I was already probably 100 cars back in the queue. It's now 6, so I've been here a couple of hours.
Right, and how many are going through at a time?
Oh, it's hard to tell from back here. It looks like maybe 20 or 30.
Right. And then do you have to wait for people to come back the other way then? Because it's one lane, isn't it?
Yeah, we're taking turns, it looks like.
Yeah, and so how long are you expecting to wait, Paul?
I think 1 more hour, and I might be at the front there and on my way over.
if you were in Auckland, you would be doing your nut. You would be beeping, you would be abusing people, you would be screaming out the window. You sound incredibly calm in the circumstance of a 3-hour delay potentially.
Yeah, we're not in Auckland down here, I'll tell you that. There's quite a festive atmosphere. There's a few tourists, someone's playing some music, there's people dancing.
You're joking? On the
pretty
road?
laid back, next to the road.
Yeah, nice.
And a local orchardist has just come past in a forklift with a bin full of apples. He's handing apples out to the people that are stranded.
That is the best traffic report we've ever had, bar none. Thank you, Paul. We really appreciate it. Lovely to talk to you.
Everyone's just waiting patiently. And if you're listening, Bubby, I love you. I'll see you soon.
Brilliant. It's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Prime Minister says she was not insulted by an interview with an Australian journalist. Some viewers have called Charles Woolley's interview style repugnant and patronising, with much of the focus on Jacinda Ardern's pregnancy. Comments by Mr Woolley include describing her as attractive and young and suggesting people had been counting back to the child's conception date. Ms Ardern says she hasn't yet seen the interview that aired in Australia last night on Channel 9's 60 Minutes.
The interview didn't particularly stand out for me in a way that made sense when I saw some of the headlines that followed on. I had to look back and remind myself of what the questions might have been. Maybe I've lost all my sensitivity. Maybe it's just that I'm from Morrinsville. I don't know, but I wasn't particularly fazed by any of it.
Jacinda Ardern says people in the New Zealand media have asked similar questions about her pregnancy. Meanwhile, Australia's Channel 9 network has issued a statement saying 60 Minutes had strived to ask the hard questions while also showing a personal side to Ms Ardern. It says Charles Woolley came away from his interview with Jacinda Ardern in awe of her poise, intelligence and everyday charm, which was reflected in the full story. The police in Canterbury are warning that illicit pills like ecstasy or MDMA don't often contain the drug that users think they're getting. Christchurch Hospital has dealt with 13 patients with problems after taking the drug ecstasy in the last few days, and staff are warning a bad batch of the drug may be responsible. A toxicologist, Paul G, says the batch of ecstasy could be very pure or it may be adulterated with something else. The police are aware of the cases and urge anyone who's been using the drug to stop immediately. They say illicit drugs are generally made by people who are concerned with profit rather than the health and well-being of users. State Highway 1 through Kaikoura is now unlikely to open until the end of the week. The route was damaged by large landslides after Cyclone Gita tore through the area last week. The Transport Agency says the decision will be made on the reopening date by Wednesday, but once opened, the road will be single lane in more sections than it was before the storm. A spokesperson, Tim Crowe, says they were surprised at how much material came down from the hills. In the meantime, travellers will need to use the inland road into Kaikoura. The High Court in Dunedin has heard how a man lashed out at his flatmate after a day of drinking beer and spirits. Jason Carl Blackler, who's 48, is on trial for the manslaughter of 66-year-old Alan Fahey in the suburb of Brockville. The Crown Prosecutor Richard Smith says the pair spent October the 25th, 2016 drinking together.
The Crown says that he did assault Mr Fahey and he did so in a very serious way. There was no justification for the assault and the assault was plainly dangerous. It triggered and was a major contributor to his death. The Crown says that Mr Blackler is guilty of manslaughter.
Richard Smith says the jury will hear how Jason Blackler became enraged after Alan Fahey made disparaging remarks about his terminally ill sister. The trial is set down for 2 weeks. The removal of a controversial walking track up the side of Te Mata Peak could face delays of several months while iwi and other parties are consulted. Craigie Range Winery has commissioned a landscape architect to come up with a remediation plan. Here's our Hawke's Bay reporter Anusha Bradley.
Craigie Range Winery built the path up the eastern side of the peak in December, but following an outcry from the public and iwi, agreed to remove it. Last month, the winery said a resource consent application would be made in February, with work expected to start shortly after. But its chief executive, Michael Wildling, says the removal plan will now be independently peer-reviewed, and that won't happen until the end of March. Hastings District Council will also review its planning rules next month after an independent review found it failed to fully consider the cultural impact of the track when granting resource consent. Ko Anusha Bradley, Ho.
It's 6:04. Sport, the coach of the Black Caps says an improved bowling effort during the middle stages of the innings is needed if they're to beat England in their one-day cricket series. The Black Caps have a 1-0 lead in the 5-match series following last night's narrow win in Hamilton, where Ross Taylor scored his 18th one-day century. Mike Hesson was largely pleased with his side's performance with the bat and ball, but wants more commitment and concentration from his bowlers in Game 2 in Mount Maunganui on Wednesday.
There are times through the middle with the ball where we probably gave them a few freebies, which are certainly something which we know because of the way they attack that we've got to make them take tougher options, and that's certainly something we'll look at.
Mike Hesson. A consortium including 2 former NBA players and the co-owner of an English Premier League football club will become the new owners of the New Zealand Breakers basketball team. The long-time owners, Paul and Liz Blackwell, have announced a newly formed company will take control of the club from March the 1st. The consortium is led by the former NBA player Matt Walsh and includes Romy Chowdhury, a part owner of Swansea City Football Club. The former NBA All-Star and NBA champion Sean Marion is also involved. And Norway have finished top of the medal table at the Winter Olympics, winning 14 golds, the same as Germany. However, Norway won a record 39 medals overall, 8 more than the Germans. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Ali Baharoun, who hasn't let a stutter get in the way of an ambition to become a stand-up comic. Inside investigates noise pollution in Aotearoa. And we have a window on the world of Vigdis Finnbogadóttir, who in 1980 became Iceland's first female president.
It was a kind of wave of emancipation in the Nordic countries. They were so clever and intelligent and courageous, these girls.
And our first author reading on Lately with Kelly Linden, author of Crystal Rain. That's Lately with Karen Hay, on Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland fine, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Cloud increasing, patchy light rain developing tonight or tomorrow morning. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain spreading north this afternoon and evening, then clearing tomorrow morning. Waitomo to Wellington, including the Central High Country and Wairarapa, also Marlborough, Nelson and Buller. Rain spreading north today, then clearing from the south. Rain gradually spreading back southwards tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland fine today, high cloud increasing tomorrow and rain developing in Westland in the evening. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, isolated showers clearing and becoming fine this afternoon, becoming cloudy tomorrow and rain developing north of Christchurch at night. For the Chatham Islands, a period of rain this afternoon followed by a few showers. It's 6:07 on Checkpoint, and here's John Campbell.
Thanks very much, Katrina Batten. We appreciate it. This time tomorrow, National will have a new leader, 23 hours away. 5 o'clock tomorrow, they'll be joining us on Checkpoint to discuss why they won and what it is they hope to achieve. But will it be Amy Adams, Simon Bridges, Judith Collins, Stephen Joyce or Mark Mitchell? That was in alphabetical order, by the way. We think the top two are Amy Adams and Simon Bridges. It's close between them. And will Bill English's successor be the same person to see the party through to the next election? Life as an opposition leader is tough. Dr. Don Brash has weathered leadership battles both as the leader of National and ACT. Of course, he led National into that 2005 election. And I asked him today who he thought was going to get the job dubbed the worst job in politics.
Well, I don't know, of course. I'm not close to the caucus these days. I know 3 of the 5 candidates quite well. I don't know Amy Adams or Mark Mitchell so well. Because I was in Parliament with Judith Collins, worked closely with Stephen Joyce when he was director of the party, and got to know Simon Bridges pretty well too.
OK, who do you rate out of the 5?
I personally think for this particular moment in time, opposition leader, the best choice would be Judith Collins. She's the only one of the 5 who's actually been in opposition. Not long after I became leader of the opposition myself, I was at a cocktail function where Jonathan Hunt was present, then the Speaker of the House.
Absolutely.
And of course Labour.
Labour, yeah.
We'd been close friends prior to my being in Parliament. He said, Don, being leader of the opposition is the toughest job in Parliament. You're expected to have an informed opinion on everything the Prime Minister has an opinion on, and you have a small fraction of her resources to back you up. So it's very, very tough. And I think only Judith Collins understands that reality.
David Longy said in 1984, if you look like an opposition, you remain one. Is that the problem with Judith Collins, that she is too much an opposition politician?
Well, possibly, but of course she's been a minister in the government also, several different ministerial portfolios, some of them pretty tough. So she's had experience in both opposition and government, and I think that's useful. There are plenty of people who find her too aggressive, too much like a pit dog, but in opposition, I think that's an advantage. She also has the advantage that she's a woman. We've got a Prime Minister who's a woman, a very attractive woman, who's a pregnant woman. Attacking her will seem pretty difficult for a man. Not easy even for a woman, but particularly difficult, I think, for a man.
Of course, this conversation is working on the assumption that whoever leads National from tomorrow on will lead National into the next election. And what we know, looking back to when Jenny Shipley lost in 1999, she was followed by Bill English, then you, and then John Key, who won. Helen Clark lost in 2008. She was followed by Phil Goff, David Shearer, David Cunliffe, Andrew Little, and then Jacinda. I mean, this is extraordinary. It goes back to your point about being leader of the opposition and it being tough. But will the person who wins tomorrow lead National into the next election?
Yes, it's a very good question. I don't, of course, know the answer to that question, but I could see Judith Collins as being the Prime Minister also. I mean, she's very consciously emulated Maggie Thatcher in her style. Even her dress code makes her look like Maggie Thatcher. She wears formal suits and so on. So I could see Judith Collins as Prime Minister, certainly.
The other elephant in the room here is MMP.
Yes, that's right.
And National cleaned up on election night. Had it been a first past the post,
that's right.
We wouldn't be having this conversation. Bill English would be Prime Minister and the Nats would be enjoying the lovely benefits of being in government. But who of the five is best able, do you think, to work with a coalition partner and to cultivate a coalition partner?
Yeah, that's a very tough question. I don't know the answer. I suspect, though, the answer might be a Simon Bridges. And funny enough, I think he would be my second choice, even though he's male. And I've just made the point that the leader of the opposition should be a female. But Simon has got some characteristics which I think would make it easier for him to deal with, for example, a Winston Peters than perhaps most of the others.
How hard is it to deal with Winston Peters? In 2005, if you'd managed to swing Winston Peters, you would have been Prime Minister, right?
That's correct, yeah. Helen and I both had 57 people supporting us to be Prime Minister, and Winston Peters once again decided which of the two would be Prime Minister. I don't know Winston very well, I have to say. Until, 12 months ago, the last time I spoke to him was in 2005. I mean, we're not close bosom pals at all. He's a curious enigma, really. I think it's the best way of describing him in New Zealand politics. Quite unique, in a sense. So not easy to deal with Winston, but will he still be leader of New Zealand First in 2020? I personally doubt it. So the leader of National, leader of the opposition, I suspect will be dealing with either Ron Mark or Shane Jones.
Which means, and boy, we're doing a lot of crystal ball gazing here, but that would make me think that New Zealand First will be less of a force, right? I mean, Shane Jones might have some of the appeal that Winston Peters has. Ron Mark doesn't have anywhere near the appeal that Winston Peters has. And so National needs to cultivate new friends, doesn't it? And at the moment, it's hard to see who they might even be.
That's right. At the moment, ACT looks very small indeed. Having said that, the Free FDP in Germany disappeared from the Bundestag completely at one election, came back with 10%. So who knows what happens to ACT. But minus ACT, what have you got? United Future is gone, Maori Party is gone. Could National do with the Greens? Not in their present state of mind. And if the Greens had a change of heart, and like the German Greens were willing to talk to a centre-right party, then that changes the ballgame completely.
This is a cheeky question, you may not want to answer it, but if you were in caucus tomorrow, who would you be voting for?
I think I'd vote for Judith.
Don Brash, we will know tomorrow, and the leader will join us after the 5 o'clock news tomorrow night. It's 30 minutes past 6. Auckland commuters are bracing themselves for transport chaos as train staff refuse to work overtime for the next 3 weeks. Now, the partial strike is over a long-running dispute between workers and the train operator Transdev, which wants to do away with train managers in favour of a single driver. The action means Southern, Western and Eastern Line peak services in Auckland will run at 20-minute intervals rather than the usual 10 during peak times. Our reporter Eva Corlett is at Britomart Station and joins us now. Hi Eva, how are you? And
hi John.
How's it going there? Is it chaos? Commuter chaos? We'd like to use alliteration.
It might be a bit of an overstatement, John. I mean, there's a steady stream of commuters coming down to the platforms, and the platforms are looking quite full, but they're not bursting. I mean, it is the central sort of transport hub for Auckland, but I suppose the commuters from this end do benefit from being able to jump on board first, so I guess there might be maybe a bit more trouble down the line. There's also been a bit of trouble with the services between Kapakura and Tukukoe, just with a fault on the tracks, but that seems to have resumed now. There are a few signs up around sort of explaining that there is a strike and there may be delays, and but I mean, for the most part, actually, people don't seem to know that there's anything really going on, and they don't seem to be too fazed by it.
How long have you been there for, Eva? What was it like when you first arrived? Have things calmed down, or has it actually just been calm throughout?
It's actually been pretty calm throughout. It has ramped up slightly in the last sort of 20 to 30 minutes, but for the most part, pretty steady.
Eva Corlett live from Britomart Station. Just before you go, any sort of picket line, anyone supporting the industrial action? Because this is they feel very strongly about it, don't they, the workers? And that is that essentially there will be single driver trains and no managers. Anyone there in support of them?
That's right. There's one union member who is handing out flyers, just explaining in detail why they are doing it, and they really do stress within that pamphlet that they are looking out for the safety of the public. A couple of people that I've spoken to, on the one hand, one man, when I asked him whether he was inconvenienced, he said he was bloody inconvenienced. And that he didn't support the strike, but others have very much supported it, especially one woman who said that she would feel much safer travelling in the evening if she knew that a manager was also on board monitoring. But for the most part, yeah, people don't really know what it's about, and it seems to be the only information is coming from the union staff that are standing outside at the moment.
Eva Corlett joining us live from Britomart. Thanks so much, Eva. Note to the subs, it isn't commuter chaos. Sounds pretty much like business as usual. Australia has a new Deputy Prime Minister as Barnaby Joyce shuffles off to the backbenches. Mr Joyce was forced to resign last week as National Party leader and Deputy PM due to the fallout from his extramarital affair with a former staffer and separate allegations of sexual misconduct. Today he was replaced by Michael McCormack, a former journalist and news editor from Wagga Wagga in New South Wales. From Canberra, here's the ABC's Stephanie Boris.
Meet Australia's newest leader.
I, Michael Francis McCormack, do swear that I will well and truly serve the people of Australia in the office of Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Michael McCormack was sworn in as Deputy Prime Minister this morning after the National Party held a special meeting to elect their new leader. It was called after Barnaby Joyce announced he would resign. The now backbencher wouldn't comment on his successor going into the meeting.
Hey guys, how you going? Morning. Morning.
Happy with Michael McCormack as leader, mate?
It's going to be a great day. How are you?
It was during this morning's meeting that Mr Joyce formally resigned and the Nationals chose their new leader. Nationals whip Michelle Landry was tasked with conveying the news.
So there's a new era now. Michael McCormack is our new leader.
But it wasn't as straightforward as expected. Michelle Landry explained there was a last-minute entry.
We had a contested leadership ballot. George Christensen and Michael McCormack put their names forward, and Michael McCormack is now the new leader.
Michael McCormack shrugged off the contest.
I want to acknowledge my colleagues. As I said, they are the very best team to work with. We've been a strong and united team, and together we have delivered large projects. We have punched well above our weight
and we will continue to do so.
That message of a strong and united team is critical for the Nationals following more than a fortnight of drama. The attention has been on Barnaby Joyce after details of his affair with a staffer who fell pregnant were made public. And separately, Mr Joyce is also facing an allegation of sexual harassment by a West Australian woman. Members of the Liberal Party have been angry that Mr Joyce's private life took the focus away from policy matters. But Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull was keen to put the issues behind him as he welcomed Michael McCormack to the new role.
Well, Michael, congratulations.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Looking forward to continuing our very strong and successful coalition.
That's Australia's new Deputy PM and National Party leader Michael McCormack ending that report from the ABC. By the way, Mr McCormack has hit the headlines in the past himself. The 53-year-old was forced to apologise for stridently homophobic comments he made in an editorial when he was running a rural newspaper in 1993. Waiheke Islanders, some of them sitting cross-legged on the floor, have packed the Environment Court as they try to stop a controversial marina. The marina, which comes complete with a floating car park and yacht club, would be the island's first. A group, Save Kennedy Point Marina, is trying to stop it, but the developer says they're out of touch with the rest of the island and need to accept the marina is just what Waiheke needs. If you don't know about Waiheke, it's about a 35-minute ferry ride from downtown Auckland. Rowan Quinn has been at the hearing in Auckland.
It was an extra busy 9 a.m. ferry from Waiheke to the mainland with dozens of people heading to the hearing. 9-year-old Te Au Aio Animerete sat on her mum's knee in the courtroom.
You can go swimming, there's a swing there, and you can climb the big ash tree. I think that if they do that to the marina, that will probably change in some way.
And she made it through most of the hearing awake.
It was really boring.
But behind the lengthy technical submissions, the case itself is an interesting one. Kennedy Point Boat Harbour wants to build a New Zealand first, a marina where everything floats, including the breakwater, the car park for more than 70 cars and the yacht club. The opponents, Save Kennedy Point, say it's for boats, maybe even super yachts, for rich folk and would ruin the quiet little bay with its pebble beach and native bush. The lawyer for the developer, Derek Nolan QC, opened its case today saying Waiheke is a busy maritime area, something that's important to Auckland's economy.
Waiheke is an island and relies on boats for access. It is a destination and place of residence for boaties of all kinds. To suggest that a marina does not fit within the ethos of this island defies logic.
He said the opponents were seeing Kennedy Point through rose-tinted glasses. It was already well developed.
Suburban and lifestyle housing development, roads, causeways, intensive horticulture, wineries and other buildings, and located in Kennedy Bay itself is a primary freight and vehicular ferry terminal and associated car parking.
And Mr Nolan said the claim the marina was for the rich was wrong. 700 people had expressed an interest, many of them ordinary New Zealanders. One of the Save the Kennedy Point supporters, Kathy Vogels, said after the hearing so many had made the trip to court to show they were behind the cause.
It's just very important for us to be part of this process. It's a beautiful little bay, a quiet little bay, essentially a bay which is used by the public, and I would very much like to see it stay as it is.
Save Kennedy Point will open its case later this week. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
The residents of the rebel-held Syrian enclave of Eastern Ghouta continue to be bombarded by airstrikes and mortar rounds, despite the UN calling for a 30-day ceasefire. More than 500 people have been killed in the past week as Syrian forces launch a final push to retake the area. Conditions in the enclave, which is home to about 400,000 people, have been described as hell on earth. And now there are fresh reports of chlorine gas attacks. The BBC's Jeremy Bowen has more.
Inside Eastern Ghouta. In almost 7 years of war in Syria, real ceasefires have been rare, ineffective and short. The UN couldn't agree on a start time for the ceasefire. The best they could do was to say, without delay. That is elastic enough to wreck this ceasefire's chances.
Today is the first day post the ceasefire resolution, Still there is water plane in the atmosphere, still shelling, but the level is less than before.
Civilians are still being killed. Already the Russians say Jaish al-Islam, the main armed group in the enclave, has broken the ceasefire. It says it's forced to fight back.
When the regime is not abiding by the UN resolution, I cannot stand still and watch and not defend myself and our families in Ghouta.
This boy and the men with him are, we're told, victims of a chlorine attack. When it's weaponized, chlorine is banned under international law. The Russians claim this is fake, part of a plan to discredit the Syrian army. It is another bad sign for the ceasefire. The Syrian army is dug in around eastern Ghouta, reported to be pushing forward. Ceasefire or not, it can sense victory.
Jeremy Bowen, the BBC's Jeremy Bowen with that report. Winston Churchill, widely acknowledged as the leader who held the line as Britain stood against Hitler's Germany during the Second World War. But new research has revealed that the politician's personal life was more complicated than previously thought. An affair has been discovered that could have ruined his career and changed the way history has remembered him. Valerie Sanderson from the BBC's Newsroom programme has the details.
As Hitler's troops swept through Europe, Winston Churchill's masterful speeches held his country together.
If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be freed, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit upland. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age.
Cometh the hour and cometh the man with a huge personality, a will to fight, and it seemed a perfect partner in his wife Clementine, who stood by him throughout their long, happy and apparently faithful marriage. But now it's emerged that Churchill had a relationship during the 1930s with the socialite Doris Castle-Ross. As one of the academics involved in the research, Warren Doctor of Aberystwyth University in Wales, explains.
Churchill and her, they had a very pleasant relationship. They enjoyed each other, and she sort of was a muse for him because he painted her at least 3 or 4 times.
With war threatening, Churchill ended the relationship and Doris Castle-Ross moved to the US, eventually managing to secure a rare flight back to the UK during the war with the help of her former lover. It was an affair he needed to keep secret.
The pressure on keeping and maintaining the US special relationship would have been very much in Churchill's mind, and so anything that might damage that or smear his character, I think he would have been worried about.
Doris Castle-Ross died during the 1940s from an overdose of sleeping tablets. Churchill's wife Clementine discovered what had happened later. To Warren Doctor, she's the hero of the story. So, all these decades on, why should this matter?
This is a part of the enigma that is Winston Churchill, and he's ultimately so incredibly fascinating. And there's still loads of things to be discovered in the archives. I mean, who can say what treasures it holds? And this is one of the great things about, Winston Churchill's still very much a hero for me, and in no way am I doing this to besmirch him. I just want to understand the man.
That was Warren Doctor ending that report from Valerie Sanderson of the BBC. It's 6:27. A lot of feedback tonight. Don Brash, it has to be said, cops it like a chook, really, when he comes on the wireless on RNZ. Lots of you basically saying, why are we interviewing him? Well, we're interviewing him because he had the experience of being the leader of the National Party in opposition during a series of leaders in opposition. So when Jim Bolger was replaced by Jenny Shipley was replaced by Bill English was replaced by Don Brash was replaced by John Key. And this is what can happen after 3 terms in government, that the person who leads the party next, if they don't become Prime Minister, as was the case with Phil Goff, David Shearer, David Cunliffe and Andrew Little, doesn't have longevity in the position. So it was interesting to hear his opinion on that, but lots of you say, no, it's not interesting to hear Don Brash's opinion on anything. And you say it in most unequivocal terms. There was a delightful man who texted in such unequivocal terms that he sent a subsequent text apologising, which is very sweet. But let's read out some of the feedback that is fit to print. National's coalition of losers. As a former 30-year supporter of the National Party, the leadership continues to dismay. All of the candidates that are seeking the leadership are the same senior members directly responsible for the most popular party on election night losing the election. Really interesting to hear Heather Roy, former ACT Party leader. Worth reading her blog. You'll just find it if you Google Heather Roy. Sorry, she was an ACT Party leader. She was a minister under John Key, ACT Party MP. She says she's really surprised how little concession to MMP elections has been given in this conversation. Hi John, the Aussie interviewer insulted our capable, intelligent and very polite PM because she's a woman. That sort of interview never ever happens from our politicians. Why can't men like him and others, like Mark Richardson, get it into their heads that Jacinda Ardern should not have to hear, let alone have to consider such questions and have to suffer their last century arrogance towards women who in this case are far more intelligent than them, says Lynn. Can't believe that disgusting, patronising Aussie treating New Zealand's Prime Minister with so little respect. Unbelievable. What a self-opinionated twat, says Leslie. Don't hold back, Leslie. Right, that's it for tonight. Thank you, everyone. We really enjoy hearing from you. Lots of people delighted from by our traffic report from Paul. Paul, if you're still stuck in the traffic eating apples that are being handed out from a guy who's driving past and watching people dance on the side of the road, you're a good bugger and you made lots of people very happy indeed. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint tonight. We're very grateful for your company on behalf of our excellent team. That's it. We'll be back with the National Party leader tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Train commuters in Auckland have mixed reactions to industrial action which disrupted travel this morning, with some saying they support the union action and others say it's inconvenient. Jacinda Ardern says she's not bothered by an interview with an Australian 60 Minutes journalist, perhaps because she's from Morrinsville. The state highway through Kaikoura is unlikely to open before the weekend. And Australian border officials have uncovered hundreds of kilograms of the drug ephedrine hidden in a shipment from China of 21,000 highlighter pens. Our next news and weather is at 7.
In a world of networked media, local can be lost. Not at RNZ.
The top of the south features a large and complex coastline, plus the country's smallest and one of its largest national parks.
RNZ's team of regional reporters and correspondents are there to bring local to the nation.
You can't be